Good afternoon, soup eaters of financial services. How are you doing? Welcome to Home Games. It's Wednesday, it's 12:30, which means it must be Home Games. It can be no other thing other than a visit to Peppa Pig World, of course, in which case you're an idiot. All the smart people are here, even if some of their soup choices are decidedly suboptimal. The asparagus from Ben, I thought was the worst thing I'd heard, and then it's broccoli and Stilton, and really, I mean, that's just a punishment, isn't it? Although I still can't smell or taste anything, so it's just kind of liquidized protein and stuff to me at the moment. So it might date back to lockdown 1. It's probably fine. And you'll soon know if it isn't. Anyway, soup chat aside, I'm really, really chuffed to welcome Patrick Mill from Novia onto Home Games. Patrick, how are you doing, sir?
Very well. Thank you for inviting me.
That is a pleasure. We've crossed swords many times and did some work together way back in the Alliance Trust days and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be nice to catch up. I do that as if like me and Patrick haven't actually practiced what we're going to talk about. But I don't want to let you into the illusion, right? I don't want to spoil it, but I probably have already. These are just some of the reasons why corporate life is now closed to me. So we're going to have a great chat, I think. There's loads to talk about. And I suspect lots of you will have questions for Patrick. Everyone was a bit shy last week with Monty, I thought. So do fire in. Patrick's a solid chat, as you know, and very kindly said he'll do his best to answer all of your questions, apart from the ones he can't answer because of the restraining order and the incident that we don't talk about. Only joking. So get fired in, and I'll make sure that we cover them all. Usual kind of housekeeping, it'll be 45 minutes. Questions either in the chat or in the ask a question button at the bottom. It's kind of helpfully titled. If your sound and vision in a Bowie style is not particularly clear, there's a little button you can press down the bottom, and that'll delay your feed to I'll give you a wee link as well. Look at that. I'm nice enough to do that. That'll delay your feed by a couple of seconds, which will sort out usually any issues you may have had. And that'll be great. As we've started saying, there aren't very many home game sessions left in their current format. We're going to change things up after the new year, but we're finishing on a big sprint of really, really strong stuff. Monty last week, Patrick this week. We've got Rohan next week. We've got Petronella from Investment Quorum the week after that. And then I think we might do a little kind of best of session just leading into Christmas. So do keep popping in. We really appreciate you coming in and spending a little bit of time with us. Right. So that's enough from me. Patrick, welcome again. And as we normally do on Home Games, let's get the kind of punting out of the way. Give us the short pitch, if you would, no more than an hour, on what the new kind of recombined Novia financial business looks like. Help us all out with where you are and what you're trying to do.
Yeah. First of all, thank you genuinely, Mark, for inviting me. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to so many people. As you know, Mark, I've been working with Anacat for 3.5 years. So slightly different to most people, you know, and I pitched an idea to them 3.5 years ago, and nothing's really changed. The fundamentals are exactly the same. We think there's an enormous commercial opportunity for advisors. The need for advice is never greater, big opportunities for them to grow their business. And we believe that a platform and a DFM is a critical contributor to an IFA business, helping them with their advice processes, but also achieve scale. So obviously we're seeing enormous change in the platform space. I'm sure we'll talk about a number of those changes, but our aim is very simple. Create a great platform and DFM business that is there to support advisors. You know, it is very focused, and we can talk about how we got to that point. But you know, we want to differentiate on service and technology, and just having that singular focus on advisors. Obviously, we'll probably talk about the acquisitions and how they came about, but essentially all of that is in the DNA. You know, Jan at Wealthtime, Bill here at Novia, and Paul at Amber, these businesses were created by advisors for advisors. So that's in our DNA. And we're supplementing that with some really good experienced executives. Barry Nielsen's coming from Nucleus, Lindsay Harrison's coming from LV. So we believe that we can really make a difference and create a great platform and DFM business. As I said, really differentiating on service and technology. Just kind of briefly touching on that, because you have only given me an hour. In terms of technology, we believe that we need to maintain control. That gives us control over proposition. Clearly we'll outsource some bits, insource some bits, but we need to have control of it. And we also have to have control of service. So where are we today, Mark? 12.5 billion of assets under administration on the platform, closing on 2 billion in terms of copia on the DFM. We've won some recent awards. I won't reel them off for service. So great foundations, but lots to do, lots planned. Working very closely with AnaCap to make this business, even better as a platform and a DFM for advisors.
Good, thank you very much, and good time for people to start picking up on anything that they want to make sure I ask you about. So once again, do ask your questions in the chat or in the ask a question button at the bottom. Over successive episodes of Home Games, we've talked a lot about ownership changes and the changing dynamics in the sector and private equity and stuff. And I know from our chats earlier, I think your take on PE's role in the sector is quite different to many others. And I'm particularly interested if you would kind of share that, because I think most people haven't worked with a PE firm going through the process. They've maybe been on the end of it and felt what that's like, which might sometimes tickle a bit, right? It might not always be pleasant. But very few have gone through the decision-making process that gets you to that. So I'll ask you to share a bit about your history but one of the things that I really want to pick up on is, what is it about this sector that has started making it so attractive to so many PE firms? If we start there and maybe branch out.
Really good question, Mark. So
thanks. Sorry.
First of all, I think PE involvement in any sector is hugely positive. They're willing to invest. They are about value creation, but generally they leave and exit from businesses in a much better state than they found them, because that's how they create value. So I think that's hugely positive. I think in the broadest sense, wealth is very attractive to PE. Now, obviously, I've had real experience of AnaCap. AnaCap hadn't really invested in the UK for about 5 years because didn't think the dynamics were right. There were a number of things at play. Things were too expensive. Didn't see that they could create value. But that has changed, and it's obviously changed for a number of PE firms. What they like is the fact that it's a growing market. So more and more assets are coming into the market. They like intergenerational wealth, and they love the fact that actually the requirement for wealth, be it fund management, be it platform, be it advisor, is greater today because of self-reliance and all the things that we talk about. So that's the big attraction. As I said at the beginning, I've worked with AnaCap for 3.5 years, and I pitched an idea to them around advisor platforms and DFMs. They took 6 months to research the market. Wouldn't commit or anything. So they met a number of industry experts, and even you, actually, Mark.
Only when they'd run out of experts.
When everyone else turned you down.
Absolutely.
But so they researched it enormously, and lots of research, lots of models before they made a commitment to invest in the market. didn't even look at targets or anything. It was very much, is this a market? Is the dynamics right for investment? I think, clearly I am very AnaCap. They've been fantastic to me, and I think they're a fantastic PE firm. Some of the advantages they bring is they only invest in financial services. So that was hugely helpful. So they understand regulation, they understand regulatory capital. That was hugely helpful. But also they bring much more than capital. So they bring industry experience. Business owners have run businesses, but also they bring capability. So, they've been very helpful with some of the data. They've been very helpful with some of their experiences across Europe in banks and other things. So a hugely positive experience. And, when they decided, we're going to invest in the sector, they were laser sharp with kind of what we bought. Everyone knows we were in other processes, but they had a price point that they believed that we could deliver value, and that's the price point. And, if someone's willing to pay more, that's absolutely fine. The price point is really important.
So there's a couple of really interesting things to unpack in there. So I'll start with it with a kind of difficult reputation for PE, right? Which is another a polite way of saying bad. And I think there's two things. So I hear that you're really positive on their involvement, and I know a little bit about your experience, and I did meet the AnaCap guys, and I thought they were super, super smart, as you would imagine. But outside of that, of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen some of the less positive effects of PE. We've seen retail businesses who've been built on big kind of debt-fueled kind of sugar rushes, if they can't keep trucking every minute of every day, it's wafer thin and it collapses, and things don't go well. So that kind of debt-fueled expansion, almost unrealistic. In the hope that you'll pump to a point, somebody will go for something different. That's kind of one side of it, and the other side of it, which a number of advisors have talked about on Home Games before, and lots of other places, of course, just none that also give you soup commentary at the same time, is the mismatch. It's like a prop on a winger, right? So we've got an industry which is predicated on looking after people for 20 or 30 years versus management whose incentives are all geared for 3 years or maybe 5 years or whatever else. And firms are concerned about that. And I think that's probably a relevant concern. I don't think they're wrong to be concerned. No. What would your kind of response be to those guys on those kind of two more difficult aspects?
Yeah, so the first one, again, I'm giving you my AnaCap experience. Clearly, I'm not going to go through the financial model on this call, but what I would say is they challenge me really hard on the downside. In terms, so for instance, I'm happy. So they don't take any market growth in our growth projections. So they count that as zero, because they want it to be a realistic business case, because ultimately the majority of AnaCap's investors are pension funds. So they don't want to promise returns that they can't deliver. So, clearly there's a balance because it needs to be attractive enough. But also, they are super smart. They are super smart, and they are very data driven. So, the sales pitch is not where they go. It is about the data. How do we prove that number? Where does it go? So I would suggest that certainly my experience is that, PE is very robust with their business planning, and that is important. I go back to the point that they're very experienced in financial services, which is helpful. There's bumps in the road. We all know there'll be bumps in the road, and they're expecting those bumps. So I think, from my point of view, and my executive's point of view, we wouldn't sign up to numbers that we can't deliver, and neither would AnaCap. So there has to be a meeting of, minds between management and AnaCap or PE, because otherwise it just doesn't work. In terms of timescales, I think this is a really interesting question, and I get asked it all the time from advisors. Again, AnaCap experience really. So the first thing is that AnaCap will exit at some point. We all know that. So, they've held investments for 9 years. They've held investments for 5 years. But clearly that's not 10 or 20. What I say to advisors and what AnaCap are keen to say to advisors is that they will invest a huge amount of money over the next 2 or 3 years, which will make this business much better. They can't disinvest that. That is improvement.
Yeah.
If they want to maximize value, this business has to be seen as valuable in the long term. So actually, there is a alignment of interest between me and my executive team building a business for the long term, and AnaCap supporting that, because if they believe that it's a business in the long term, it will create value. And the majority of the exits from AnaCap are another PE firm,
Right.
And apart from Aldermore Bank, most of them have been PE. So what we are trying to build is scalability, capability to be able to go and do more organic growth, more acquisitions, because we may talk about it, but I certainly see more consolidation in the market, and actually that might not be AnaCap that does that, but it might be the next one. So as I see it, AnaCap is supplying the capital today, and that's great, and we'll use that, and we need to use it effectively. It will create value in this business. It will make this a better business, and then someone else will supply the capital. From my own point of view, and my executive team's point of view, we are trying to build a business that's good in the long term for advisors.
Cool. Well, let's talk about that business a little bit more then, because that was great. Oh, actually, right. Okay, Paul, I'm going to try and read your question out. Paul says, and a regular home gamer, thank you, Paul. We know there's value in investment management, and you guys have got Copia. There is pressure on platform pricing, so margins will become even tighter. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because it depends how far you drive your op cost. But that's a good question to put to you, Patrick. Do you think other platforms will follow the route of branching out into investment management to make profit and add brackets shareholder, close brackets value?
Thanks, Paul. I mean, there's a couple of points actually there that I'd like to pick up on. First of all, probably to explain our own position. So people's obvious thoughts are, well, it's a vertically integrated model with Copia and Novia. It's not. We are actually separating out Copia, so it was part of the same entity as Novia, but we're going to make them two separate entities, and we believe we can make them both great businesses. And Copia will stand on its own 2 feet. So some of the things that you will see is that Copia is available on all platforms, pretty much. I'm sure there's a few that they're not, but generally they're available on all platforms. And we think that's right from an advisor's point of view, because firstly, the investment solution and the platform are two different advice events. So the advisors will do the right thing for their clients. But if you do adopt a centralized investment proposition like Copia, you want that for all your clients. You might not have all your clients on Novia, or you might not have them on any other platform. What that allows, and a lot of the Copia customers or advisors can use Copia across all different platforms. So we don't see cross-subsidization of, well, can we make more profit out of Copia and not so much on Novia? We see them as two separate businesses that need to stand on their own 2 feet. So that's a bit of a distinction between other models in the market. In terms of platform pricing, of course there's pressure. Of course there are. We understand that. Very much we want to play in good value for money. We've already talked about the fact that we want to differentiate by service and technology. So we believe that that's a different pricing point than some others, and we believe that with operational costs we can still deliver in terms of profitability. And I talked about the DNA, and actually, Bill here at Novia, Jan at Wealthtime, were very focused on profit, and both were very profitable organisations before we took them over. So, can I see more people going into investment management? Potentially, but ultimately, this has to be about what's right for the advisor. And I go back to the point that it's two separate advice events.
Cool. I'm hoping people can still hear me. I did a session just before this and the battery's bloody run out on this camera. I'm trying to change my camera to a different one. And it's kind of struggling. So you might have to do without me, without my shiny, pretty face for a little while I try and work that out. But I don't think we particularly need it. You can still hear me, Patrick. Can somebody in the chat say they can still hear me? I assume everybody can. So, listen, I'm yet to hear many platform bosses say that, they're in the market of a race to the bottom and want to charge as little as possible and all that kind of stuff. But clearly scale's a big part of that. That helps drive down the op cost and the cost to serve and stops the margin compression that Paul's talking about, even if price compression is there. If that's the case, I'm presuming there must be efficiencies to be gained in having three businesses that you're bringing together. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how does that play out for you over time, or as much as you're able to share anyway.
Yeah, no, of course, Mark. I suppose that there's two elements really. One is technology, and in the same way that we want to control the technology for our advisors, because we think that's important, we want to control the technology to enhance service, bring down operational cost as well. So that's one element. But obviously, we have bought three businesses. We bought Wealthtime, and that completed about a year ago, Amber earlier in the year, and then obviously Novia. So going forward, we are going to have one platform business. It will be in one entity. Kind of two different strategies really. So the Amber financial book will be migrated onto the Novia platform. That will happen in the early part of next year. For those of you that know, that's on SEI, so we'll be migrating that in. We're going to be integrating Wealthtime. For those of you that don't know, Wealthtime has its own proprietary technology called NRAP. And going forward, that is going to be part of our overall technology stack. And I suppose we may talk about technology, but I suppose what we see is a little bit like an iPhone in terms of you got a core system, which for us is GBST, and we intend to keep that. But it's the apps that bring it alive. And currently we use some apps from Finicom. I know you've had Ray on here. Yep. And we intend to use some from NRAP that Steve has developed at Wealthtime. So that will be integrated. So initially, Wealthtime advisors won't really see any difference, but over time they will see some technology upgrades as we bring all the technology together.
That's kind of interesting dynamic, isn't it? So we've got been moving away from the Amber stuff, but you've got a number of different architectures there, and I wonder at what point we stop as a sector being so fascinated with this because stuff just works and you don't actually care. It's like how did the mail app get coded? Is it in PHP or is it in Laravel or how did we do it? And the man and woman in the Clapham omnibus gives not a damn because it just works.
Yeah.
What do you see? How far away from that do you think we are?
Yeah, I actually don't think we're very far away at all. So I've brought in a new CTO, Chris Bowles. He was CTO at Wealth Club before, but he was at Hargreaves for 7 years as head of development before. So knows platforms inside out. And what we believe is that it's about microservices, and lots of phrases used like hub and spoke. You have a core system that will hold your data and do the basics, and then you have microservices around the outside that will do things and put the data back in. So at the moment, most people know. So Finicomp supply model portfolio manager. So the portfolio on model portfolios are done through that system, but then the data goes back into GBSD. So I see evolution of platform technology, so that it's not this big monolith, and actually it's different segments and microservices, so that you can add them or replace them or whatever, but actually your core system stays as is. Replatforming is to be avoided at all costs.
Well, clearly in your history with ATS, and I guess now this is, you've got some experiences you can share. But I think that's a really interesting point about the microservices stuff, because if you listen to Ray talk, well, first of all, it's hard to understand him because he's Australian. But second of all, the kind of logical extension of what he's saying is that you become curators as platforms as much as administrators. And I guess that's predicated on the tech doing what it's meant to do and delivering the kind of experience that advisors want. And when you were talking about differentiating on service and technology, without wishing to be rude, for the slightest fraction scintilla of a moment, I've heard that before, right? And nobody stood up and said, "Do you know what we want? Bad service and bad technology," even though some of them probably do have that. But the question is, how do you get there? And if you're starting to fragment the kind of provision of the technologies, does that change the nature of a company like Novia? Does that mean that you spend a bit less time on certain things and a bit more on stitching this stuff together and working out who to shout at if something does fall over, so that advisors don't notice? Or how does it on a practical level play out in the business?
It's kind of what I said at the beginning, in terms of we want to have control of the technology. Now, are we going to develop that all ourselves? No, of course we're not. I use this example all the time. So, capital gains tax calculator. Why would you develop that yourself? There's hundreds in the market, and we can all argue about which is the best one, but you choose one and plug it in. And that's what I mean by control. So, Chris is tasked with us, differentiating by technology and being the best platform possible for advisors. We've got some things that we want to develop. Now, some of those we will be able to develop ourselves, but some of them will just go to the market and take it. And it's much more about how you join it up. That's much more of Chris's job, is how we join it up, how it works, how it feeds into the front end, than developing, something over on the right hand side.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Brilliant. I want to come back to the replatforming point in a moment, because it's good fun to talk about, and we should do that. But David very kindly asked a question. Thank you, David. Lovely to have you on. Do you see platform costs becoming a business cost like the rest of an advisor's tech stack, rather than a client cost over time, and what impact might that have? So this is the advisor pays model, which Novia has tried, hasn't it?
Yes.
I don't know if that's in sort of previous years, or if it, where it is for you. So tell us your views on that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, isn't it? In terms of we see a platform being much more integrated into the advisor's tech stack going forward, and part of the development has to be those integrations that we all, want, and the integrations that are two-way, so that advisors can just key in one and it goes to all the different sections that it needs to go to. So we see platforms as a real enabler of that. And I think that, over time, it will become more and more and more embedded into that advisor's tech stack. Ultimately, the regulator will have input in terms of who will pay and those things. But I do see it much more integrated as part of an advisor's tech. However, just to argue against myself, unfortunately, I'm too old. But if you think about kind of 10, 15 years ago on an advised platform, the end customer would never have logged on, never looked at it. They would have waited for their advisor quarterly report, or, oh, look, my portfolio's gone up, or whatever. The end customer is much more engaged. And we're talking to a number of advisors that are saying, they want that element enhanced. So, it needs to fulfill that end customer. Of course, they're advised and all those things, and the advisor, makes the decisions. But that engagement with the end customer must be much greater than it was 10 years ago. So, I think that there's a big onus on platforms to be better for advisors, but also better for end customers. Yeah. I'm not sure it answers the question about.
No, you dodged it brilliantly.
Yeah.
I thought it was excellent. But we used up 5 minutes. That was great. I wonder if there's an answer around that about horses for courses, right? So I think some of what you're saying there, of course, did answer the question properly, which is that things that the client benefits from directly, it's reasonable to ask the client to pay for, right? Yeah. And so you got, I don't know, it might be client portal stuff or integration with their banking apps, holistic management, Yodlee kind of stuff that's all going on. There's something else in there. And I remember having some fairly vibrant arguments, possibly with Bill, your predecessor, actually, and Hugo and various people, because I kind of like the advisor pays model. And there's other models I like, which we might come back to as well. And I kind of enjoyed arguing against them. And I think they thought I was irritating. Well, I know they thought I was irritating. But they were correct, I think, in that custody and basic administration, policy management, which we don't talk about anymore, but still happens, right? ISAs still have to work. And tax relief has to get claimed, though, all this stuff has to happen. Clients should pay for that. That's just part of it. Money's got to sit somewhere, and it might be less than a typical full-fat platform charge, but it's not nothing. And somewhere in there is advisor tooling. And I wonder then, can you see a future, might be Novia, might not, right? Where that microservices element you talk about, the fragmentation that comes with that, kind of enables that pick and mix thing, and advisors can choose which bits they want to pay for, which bits it's reasonable to pass to the client.
Yeah, and I think whatever you want to call it, pick and mix, menu style, I do see that, and microservices makes that much easier. So an advisor might say, okay, we need basic custody and all of that stuff, and the advisor should pay for that, and that's X bits. But then I do want two-way integration with my back office. I do want this, and actually I should pay for that. So I think not only in terms of paying, I think that's part of it, but also just being much more flexible in terms of what the advisor wants, and much more menu based in terms of, actually, that's all very interesting, Patrick, that you offer that, but we don't use that, so we don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I suppose you would expect me to say this, of course you would, but that's why we believe we're an advantage, being very singular focus on advisors, because of course they've got varying needs, but they're one population. We can, we all wake up every day trying to make this better for advisors, and that does help.
No, I get that, and I think for all, there's an easy cynicism that always exists between advisors and providers. But the truth is, like, if you're actually mates with people that work in these businesses, they didn't turn up to, have something that fell over or didn't work or whatever, and everybody's frustrated by that stuff. We're talking about different models, so I'll take you back in time a little bit, if I may. We won't do much about Alliance Trust Savings, but it was remarkable to me that there was only one fixed fee platform in the market, and that was ATS, and now no longer there, of course. And it just never quite caught it. And over On the direct side, we have somebody like Interactive Investor, who's growing like gangbusters, potentially being acquired by Aberdeen, and launching things like friends and family pricing, where it's like having Spotify family membership now, free trades for your auntie or whatever. Very, very retail sensibility. Do you have any reflections back on that time, and why don't we have fixed fee alternatives now to the same extent? I mean, Wealthtime had it too. It's still got some. I always forget to mention Wealthtime in there, but Wealthtime does too. What do you think? How come it never quite got there?
Well, I suppose when I reflect back, HCS was hugely successful in terms of asset growth. We grew it from 3 billion to 15 billion. There was an acquisition in there, but I suppose, when I took it over, it was a D2C platform. It didn't have advised business, so it was D2C. And clearly advised is my background. I'm a big believer in advice, and I wanted to take that into the advice market. We did that, and quite rightly, the advisors challenged me in terms of, well, hold on, Patrick, you've taken a D2C platform and repainted it and call it an advisor platform. Well worked out. That's exactly what I did. And so in lots of ways, the business wasn't built for an advised business, and so it was slightly compromised. So it was quite difficult to make the advised work. I suppose the other bit, and I need to be careful with this because lots of people do their business direct through Hargreaves and Interactive Investor. I would argue, I'm not sure that number of people probably should. Having run a D2C platform, I've seen the tip in the Sunday Times on a Sunday, lots of purchases on a Monday. But advisors obviously bring a greater knowledge, expertise to the process. And quite rightly, advisors are brilliant at representing their clients. And so if you look at the fixed fee model, quite rightly, advisors will always select against you because they'll work out what's the break point. What's the break point on a fixed fee? So up until that point, they'll select against you, understandably so. So they'll go to another platform. Then you'll get to this point, and not to the point. They don't move at the point, but when they go then they choose you, but you're not having the revenue to run the business. So in some ways, it's really hard to make it work because advisors are doing a good job, and it's not that there's lots of direct investors who are very knowledgeable, but it's a slightly different dynamic. So I see why flat fee works in the retail space.
Yeah, the cross subsidy gets driven out. And it's interesting, isn't it? Even after all this time, the fundamental dynamics of how people invest through pensions and tax advantage savings or not, or whatever else, are really no different. And it does still rely on the cross subsidy that it always used to rely on. It's kind of interesting. We couldn't make it work in this market. I don't know it's any secret. We did some work together way back in the day, and you could see it. And advisors were only ever doing the right thing, I think. And it did hobble it with getting volume through. The other thing I always remember was people didn't. You're right. They didn't go on the cutoff point. They went like at 1 million plus or something like that. So it was their very most important case that month or whatever. So every single case had to be babied through. And it was certainly challenging. But it's really interesting, and that suggests to me then that kind of holy line of demarcation of church and state between advised and direct. Do you reckon that sustains then? This isn't something we've talked about before, but that's a fascinating reflection on the dynamic shift between the two. And I had an advisor on literally yesterday saying, I really, really want a platform that's great for me to run my models or whatever it was that she was doing. But I've got a load of clients that want to run some money themselves and I want it on the same place. Who do I use? And there are people that do that, of course.
Yeah.
But I wonder if the end kind of bit of what you're saying is actually boys and girls don't even try. It's too different.
Well, I suppose it's how you define on your own, because, you know, I can see a day where it's all under the advisor, but actually the end customer, you know, and this is what I'm talking about us enhancing, you know, our end portal for end customers. Actually, with the advisor's blessing, fine, you know, you want to invest 10 grand and you want to play with that, that's absolutely fine. But it's still under that umbrella, the advisor. And that's quite important, because the advisor, you know, can only give the quality of advice on you know, the whole data. You know, they need to see the whole client, not part of the client. So I can see that. I suppose my experience is that it's a very different mindset from an organization for advice compared to direct. And, you know, going back to ATS, you did some work with me, Mark, you know, in terms of operations, customer service people understanding the client is the advisor, not the end client. But, you know, and they've had years of D2C, so you know, it was challenging for them, and I understood that. But it's a very different model.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we work with some direct platforms and loads of advice ones, and they're just different businesses. They go at a different pace. They work in a different way, and it is just different. It's not better or worse, but the jeopardy comes of speaking to one client. And if Mr. Polson's unhappy because of whatever, obviously that's very important. And Mr. Polson will probably run and speak to the Daily Mail or whatever if he's grumpy. Probably not the Daily Mail. But of course, an advisor could be 1,000 clients. So the level of kind of being on your game every day, I think, is just different. It is different. I've got a couple of questions coming in on the end here. I've got one from Ben I want to make sure I get to, but just before I do, Paul's tagged on to this part. So Ben, I will ask your question, I promise, before we get in there. And Paul disagrees with you, Patrick. It's outrageous. How many client portals does a client need? How many client portals does it take to change a light bulb? A client can even have a portal from their cash flow modeling provider. That's true as well. My thinking is the financial advisor firm should control data and what their client gets to see. Feels like the tool should be at the CRM. Right. This is a control of the advisor desktop point. Thank you, Paul. It's a great point to make as we come to an end here. So actually, if you believe that the advisor is the point of aggregation, then platform can never be the point of aggregation. So the thing the advisor is closest to, which our research tells us always is the CRM. They may not like it very much, what they're using, or they might be really keen on it, but it's incredibly emotionally and administratively important to them. That's where it happens. Your job as a platform is to get out the way and feed data over there. Do you? So you don't need to worry about portals. What do you think of that challenge?
I mean, it's a view, and a number of people share the view with Paul, but certainly there is a number of advisors that are talking to us about not only about portal, but, you know, you mentioned it earlier, Mark, in terms of open banking. You know, is there a way that we can bring more information in, you know, and we can have a look at that? So I expect it will differ from advice firm to advice firm. I don't think there's much dispute about the end customer is more involved than they were previously. And actually, you know, part of our USP, we believe, in the market is that we can be flexible. So, you know, if that's how Paul would want to run it, that's absolutely fine. And you go back to this menu. So actually for him, a expansive client portal is not something that Paul wants, and that's absolutely fine. So, you know, we can do it like that, or if someone does, then do it like that. I think the underlying kind of points that I want to make is I think the client is more involved. You know, ultimately the advisor is absolutely in control. Absolutely in control. You know, the relationship is with the advisor. You know, we will only ever be a support platform technology for the advisor. So the advisor needs it to work for them and their clients. I suppose we believe that there is something more that we can bring to the advisor firm to help them.
Yeah, and it's not guns and butter, right? So you can provide, you can do work on getting fundamentals right and have a client portal, and people use it or don't. That was brilliant, and thank you, Paul, for the challenge. I think that's always fun to get that. Ben, I'm just going to finish off. We're at time, so just a quick one. Ben's asked, saying you've got some nucleus guys coming, which is great. Quite a lot of the senior people who we all kind of have known at Novia for years and years and years have taken the view that now is the time to go and write a book or whatever it is that they're doing, brush up on their short game. I suspect it's a hard one for you to answer, but how's the response been to that? Because it is unsettling when people move on.
Yeah, and Bill and the team have been here for a long time and very, very stable. Clearly, Ben, you know, I won't be able to comment on individual circumstances, but I suppose that there's a couple of things. Firstly, you know, some decided now was the right time. You know, obviously there was a financial event, which meant that, you know, they received a financial payment. You know, everyone's finances are individual. So some decided, actually, now's the time. Secondly, you know, let's be, you know, really honest. A startup is very different to the size of the business today. And some of the things that I'm bringing in wouldn't have been right for a startup. And so, you know, sometimes it's horses for courses. And, you know, we are taking this business on the next stage of the evolution. And some people decided that wasn't right for them. And obviously, quite rightly, you know, again, being open with everyone, you know, we make assessments of what is right for our journey, what's going to help us deliver. And, you know, that's the decisions that we've made. So there are various reasons. And I think that, you know, clearly it is unsettling because, you know, people have been around a long time. However, I think the really positive thing is that the majority of people recognize that things needed to change. Not that, you know, it was, you know, wrong before. It's just a different stage. It's a different, you know, we want to move this business from 12.5 billion to 20+ billion. You know, what Bill and the team done was amazing. You know, to deliver that sort of growth, that sort of profit, fantastic. You know, I've said this to Bill and the team, not, you know, clearly I'm not going to disclose the price, but not many people in life start a business and get it to worth X. That's an amazing achievement, and they should be rightly proud of that.
Quite right. Listen, that's a great place to call it. We've had great engagement today. Thank you so much for everyone that's asked questions. And huge thanks to you, Patrick, for being, as you always are, really, really open and honest. You can go and have some soup now. It's nice. I like soup, but I wouldn't want to confuse it with a meal. So next week we've got Rohan Sivajoti. Now, Rohan's been on before talking on diversity and other matters in financial services. We're going to talk about next gen next week. It's going to be really interesting, and the registration is live for that, so if you cast about on social media you'll find it. In the meantime, thanks everybody. Have a brilliant week. We will see you next week for Home Games. Thanks again.
Brilliant.
Blank Cat out.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.